Hello friends, today we are going to discuss what we can calculate from a cohort study. So before that we need to know what is a cohort study. A cohort study is an observational study in which a group of people free of disease is followed over time to see who develops the outcome. So uh, a group of people which are free from diseases will follow them over time, and a few will be exposed to the risk factor and few will not be. So we'll see out of them who will get the disease and who will not. So that's the outcome. So first of all, we will make a 2 by 2 table. We'll write expose, non-expose on in rows, and in columns we'll write disease and non-disease and A, B, C, D as you can see in this table. Okay. So what things we can measure through a cohort study? So first of all, we can identify the incidence of the disease. So incidence in exposed. So how can we calculate incidence in exposed? So we have a formula A upon A plus B. A plus B is total exposed people, as you can see here, and incidence in unexposed. So incidence in unexposed will be uh, number of unexposed with disease upon total number of unexposed. So C upon C plus D. So this will be the formula for incidence. Now let's talk about the relative risk ratio. For this, we need to divide incidence in exposed upon incidence in unexposed. So what will we get through this? We will compare the risk of disease in exposed versus in unexposed. So and the third thing which we can calculate is a risk difference, attributable risk, which is incidence in exposed minus incidence in unexposed, shows the absolute exact risk due to exposure. So due to the exposure, exact risk we can identify through cohort study. Now we'll talk about attributable risk percentage among exposed. So what is this? Risk ratio minus 1 upon risk ratio into 100. This will give us attributable risk percentage. Population attributable risk percentage. What is this? Incidence in population minus incidence in unexposed upon incidence in population into 100. So this will give us population attributable risk percentage. So these were the five things we can calculate in cohort study. Okay. So now let's see the interpretation of the risk ratio. Risk ratio is equal to 1 means no association, which means the exposure is not leading to the disease. And if risk ratio is more than 1, the exposure increases the risk. And if ratio is less than 1, then the exposure is protective. For example, if we do a cohort on wearing a helmet and head injury, we will get risk ratio less than 1. So this was the interpretation. So now important points. Cohort study can directly measure incidence, risk, can calculate risk ratio, then risk difference and attributable risk and population attributable risk percentage. Estimate temporarily exposure before disease. Yes, and establish temporarily. Yeah. Usually large, time consuming and expensive. Okay. So we will understand this with an example. So we have a cohort study of 100 smokers and 100 non-smokers, and we have made a 2 by 2 table for this. So we got A, B, C, D according to the table. Now we will calculate the incidence in exposed. For this, we need exposed people who have disease upon total number of exposed people. So the incidence is 0 0.2, which is 20%. Similarly, we found unexposed, which is 5%. Now relative risk will be incidence in exposed upon unexposed, which is 0 0.2 upon 0.05, which we get 4. So what is the interpretation? The smokers have 4 times more risk of developing COPD compared to non-smokers. So this was the interpretation. Now let's talk about risk difference. So what is it? Incidence in exposed minus incidence in non-exposed, which is 0.15. There is 15% excess risk of COPD due to smoking. So smoking increases the risk by 15%. So that is its interpretation. Now, attributable risk among exposed. So attributable risk percentage is risk ratio minus 1 upon risk ratio into 100. So we got 75% of our COPD among smokers due to smoking. So among the smokers due to smoking, 75% got COPD. This is its interpretation. Now population attributable risk ratio. What is it? Incidence of population is A plus C upon total number of population. So here we get PAR percentage as 60%, which indicates that 60% of the COPD in the population is due to smoking. So these were all the interpretations of all the values we saw here. Okay. Now, when to use a cohort study? When exposure is rare. Yes, rare diseases are studied through a cohort study. Sorry, and disease is common, but exposure is rare. Okay. If exposure is rare, we will use cohort, and if disease is rare, then we will use case control. When you want to study multiple outcomes of the exposure, yes. If multiple outcomes are being studied, then cohort study is used. You want to measure incidence and risk. When establishing temporality is important. Okay. What are the limitations of cohort study? Expensive, time-consuming, loss to follow-up, not suitable for rare diseases. As I told, rare diseases are studied through case control study or long latency diseases. Large sample size is required. Yes, these are the demerits of a cohort study. So this was a short summary of cohort study and what we calculate through cohort study. Thank you for joining. Stay tuned.